Thank you, Suzanne. And thank you, everyone, for being awake still. How many of you were out late last night? Not enough of you, obviously. This is me. You've already heard the blurb. I've already tweeted the link to the Prezzo, but you can find it on our website, on our blog, or on our Facebook as well. There's a lot of material in this that I'm actually not going to cover, and because this is in a Prezi format, afterwards you can go and explore to your heart's content the different areas around dealing with dysfunction. Now, when I talk about dysfunction, importantly, I'm not talking about this model. Now, hands up if you're familiar with this. This is Tuckman's model. Yes. So we seem to be programmed, almost like machines, to go through this forming and then storming, eventually getting to norming, and then ultimately performing. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. Because for me, dysfunction, if I look at the definitional aspect, it's about impaired or abnormal functioning. Unhealthy interpersonal relationships, particularly from a team perspective. And that pretty much described one of my teams. I received an email was one of my Scrum Masters, one of 12 on a release train. He sent me an email, was sort of nervous in its content, saying, well, we're going to go to retrospective very soon, and could you come and give me some moral support, because I'm afraid my team is going to lynch me. Now, he did a very smart thing. He took them out of the context of their normal work, all the things that would remind them of the problems that they'd suffered for some months now, and took them to Oliver Brown. Now, hands up if you've been to Oliver Brown. It's a chocolate cafe, so like Max Brenner, that kind of thing. So he took them all there, and they had chocolate milkshakes and chocolate hot chocolate and chocolate-covered stuff while they just sat and talked. The problem was that I was a little bit late, unfortunately. I was helping solve another problem, and then I arrived, and yes, lo and behold, even though they had some nice chocolate to sort of settle them down, there was still this nervous and very anxious tension in the room while people started sort of almost pointing at each other to talk about the problems that they'd had. And I realised very quickly that, yes, poor Finn had been dealing with this team going through their stages, but I needed to be able to provide them with a different set of ways of working together in order to help them transition beyond that point of disintegration of their social interaction and actually get back onto the track to getting to a stage where the whole team understood how to treat each other. This is the norming stage where the rules are known about how things work within the team so that then they can move on to performing. So I thought about, well, what kinds of sets of rules or frameworks could I actually leverage? Now, hands up if you know this guy, if you read his book on Lencioni. Very, very similar to a lot of the psychological literature. In fact, a lot of psychologists in this domain actually applaud him for actually bringing out to the fore a lot of very difficult concepts to talk about, in particular things like lack of commitment, fear of conflict, absence of trust, avoidance of accountability. We heard all about accountability just before in Ahmed's presentation. And it's a good book. It's a good book. In terms of factors, we're talking about, well, absence of trust at one end, and a good team should have trust at this end. At this other end, we have a fear of conflict. Well, in Lencioni's world, conflict is good. Now, hands up if you're American. Any Americans in the room? One. Conflict is a good thing in America. They encourage us, like, yeah, look, let's get it out there. But for Finn's team that I was helping Finn to coach and sitting there in retrospective, we have Australians. Any Australians in the audience? Keep your hand up if you like conflict. No. We also had some Chinese and some Indian people in the team as well. And from a cross-cultural perspective, these cultures do not like conflict, and they will do anything and everything to pull back from anything that might provoke some sort of antagonism. So I thought, well, is this framework going to work? And this is straight from his website. Pat shares his point of view through essays in leadership and management. And for me, this wasn't enough. I'm a science practitioner. What I'm looking for in the domain in which I deal with, and culture tends to be, if you read the version 1 survey, survey again and again, it talks about culture being one of the very, very difficult things that we struggle with. For me, I swim in it. because science helps me understand things that are repeatable. That is, that it measures what it says that it measures. And importantly, because there were some other teams on the release train that were having problems, that if I understood and was able to pick apart what was going on in this team, I could then hopefully use it in some of my other teams. From a science perspective, this is called internal reliability and external reliability. Have you done the Myers-Briggs before? Right, hands up if you're on the introverted part. Good, hands up if you're on the extroverted part. Right, so in Myers-Briggs, these are two separate factors. You can either be in Myers-Briggs introverted or you can be extroverted. Now guess what? The science literature doesn't support these as two separate factors. It says it's a continuum. And we have preferences. We might be here typically, but we'll move. In certain instances, we'll be more introverted or less introverted, or more extroverted and less introverted. So it doesn't measure what it says. I wanted something that when I was looking at dysfunction in my team in terms of behavioural perspective, that the factors that I was using to observe and measure dysfunction actually were things that could be measured, that they said that they measured what they measured, and importantly, repeatability. So I needed to look elsewhere, and because this was all around me and coaching, I went back to our 8 elements coaching model and was looking for, well, what is a behavioural role that I need to actually exhibit in order to support this team? And counsellor was the hat that I chose. It made most sense. I could have done mentor, I could have done coach, but counselling is a paradigm in which we look for structure to help to resolve dysfunction, listen and empathise. Anyone in Ed's talk earlier today, where he talked about building empathy? Yeah, I need to really understand and be able to listen with empathy to know what their concerns were from an emotional perspective. And to focus on and ultimately listen to and treat the symptoms in this. So I needed something that reflected that domain. And lo and behold, in terms of couples counselling, this is the guy to go to, Dr. John Gottman. Now, humans are pretty strange creatures, and I remember back in my postgrad, we'd be looking at human behavioural models, and I'd be really stoked if I found a model that could predict human behaviour by 20%. And here's Gottman says that he can predict dysfunction, and from his perspective, it's about relationships, both heterosexual as well as homosexual relationships. So whatever kind of interpersonal relationship, he can predict with 90% accuracy the factors that will cause that relationship to fail. 90%. Pretty significant. He's done many, many longitudinal studies, so looked at the same couples, same-sex couples, heterosexual couples, over long periods of time and how their behaviour and communication styles change. He's collected data over 20 years, has looked at over 3,000 couples, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and he's found the same things. One of the big factors in this is the relationship between the ratio of positive to negative communications. And that critical point is 0.8 to 1 positive to negative communications. Once you get down to that point, then things like this start to creep in. And he calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: contempt, defence, stonewalling, and criticism. And as I was quickly Googling and to try to remind myself about what these kinds of concepts were, and I was listening to the conversation in the team in the retrospective. And I was hearing some things that were contemptuous. Things around, well, and I'm sure you've heard this before, where someone, 2 people are having a joke and then someone looks a bit offended and you go, oh, can't you take a joke? Well, in Gottman's book, that's contempt. It's hostile humour. And these are the conversations that I was hearing and that I'd heard with this team over quite a number of months and in this retrospective. So one guy, our poor tester, saying, well, I need smaller batch jobs, and you're just putting everything in. You're developing taking all the stories in. And why can't we have smaller batches? We need a better control over our WIP. And his response was, no, we just need better testers. Obviously, you're really bad at testing. Or we need more testers. Yeah, that's what we need. Defensiveness is the second horseman of the apocalypse. And it's about seeing yourself and perceiving yourself as a victim. And so you ward off blame by by distraction, by attacking and going, well, it's not my fault, it's your fault. And again, those were the behaviours that I was hearing. Very much about, well, no, my code's perfect. I'm the best coder in this whole team. It's not my fault, it's your fault. You're the worst tester. That's the reason why. No, my tests are awesome. My code is awesome. No, it's you. But again, this was the behaviour that I had seen and that I was hearing again at this retrospective. The third horseman is stonewalling. And this is avoidance behaviour, essentially. Refusal to engage in communication. It is very much about almost turning away and turning your back on the team. And I had heard phrases like, asking someone else for information, and the response would be, oh, well, you'll get it when you get it, or you'll get it when it's done, or as soon as I know. Rather than actually engaging with the other person about, well, when do you need it, and what story does it belong to, and are we going to make it, and who else needs to be? It's, well, no, I'll just cut off the conversation by, oh, you'll get it when you get it. Fourth horseman, criticism, comes down to verbal attack. And I heard people outside of the team, QA leads, and so hands up, developers in the room, any? A few, so keep your hand up if you like curly brackets at the end of the function declaration. And some of you, and hands up if you like it at the beginning of the next line. Yes, all right, so they were arguing about that. And saying, well, your code is terrible because it's not like this, because I code like this and I'm perfect. That's what they were doing, arguing almost about nothing, but being very, very critical about something that really didn't matter. Well, maybe a little bit, but... So that's criticism. And those are the four horsemen. Unlike Lencioni, where he says, well, we've got, commitment and lack of commitment, so we need to have commitment. And this is Gottman's secure house, basically, his house of a sound relationship house. And I've adapted some of the words so that it has more meaning for teams, because the one at the bottom which says build friendship, he calls love maps. That's really nice. That's really nice if we're a couple, let's build some love maps. But I didn't feel I could take that model and just actually describe it and explain it to my Scrum Master. So I called it, building friendships. Now, a lot of this to you might sound like about a bunch of hippy-dippy nonsense. But the reality is that high-performing teams, good, functioning, solid teams, have a balance of social cohesion with their task management. And good leaders know how to balance the both. Most leadership can be classified as either looking after the performance of the team or looking after their relationships. So let's look at a couple. Creating shared meaning. There's a guy called Bob Waisfizz, and he was a student of Gert Hofstadter, who looked at IBM in the 80s and tried to understand globally what sort of culture IBM had and what were the differences. Because if this is a monolithic giant, differences in culture were probably more likely to be based on the environments that they're in. So difference between China or India, Japan, etc. And Bob Waisfizz took some of that and said, well, there are a bunch of things, and we all bring that culture from our homes and from our into the workplace. So that becomes part of our workplace culture. But he says that there are 4 things to think about in terms of building that culture, building that sense of team. Symbols. That's a T-shirt that one of my Scrum Masters wears when they get towards the end of the sprint. It's the heads-up display from Star Wars, where this guy was going along and trying to get the torpedo in, stay on target. And everyone knows, as soon as he puts that on, all right, it's time to focus. We've got the proverbial chute, thermal exhaust port, and we've got to get the torpedo in. So he puts that on. There's a lot of fans on this release train of David Hussman and Jeff Patton's work. Love coaching my product owners to do things like story mapping. And they all have Dude's Law badges to remind themselves about how to think about value. And they have copies of Jeff Patton's books on their shelves not only to remind themselves that this is a good reference, but also as a symbol to everyone else about this is what we care about. Anyone recognise this pin? Game of Thrones, who wears it? The hand, yes, the hand of the king. One of my scrum coaches, Steve, he's also a little athletics coach, but he needed to go away to do some little athletics things for some sort of workshop or something. And so at a key meeting, I think it was sprint planning, he got one of those and went up to one of his team members and said, "You are now the hand of the Scrum Master, and you speak on behalf of the Scrum Master." So every team, when John says something, it's as if he's speaking with my voice. Very, very important ritual, but a symbol of John's authority in relation to coordination and shepherding and helping the team coordinate to get over the line. And values, well, what can you tell just by this picture of these teams' values? Any thoughts? Like a personal space. Believe it or not, this was a COBOL mainframe development team. So talking significant legacy system. These guys used to be like this. But here, only 6 months after working in a Scrum way, this is how they work. They work together. I rarely see anyone by themselves. They're either pairing or doing cross-functional pairing. That says to me, like, these guys actually like each other's company so much, yes, they're invading each other's personal space. So some patterns that I started to talk at this retrospective were things that I felt were ideas that the team could think about in terms of building that sense of team, who they were, what they stood for. So I said, do you know that one of the other teams, have you guessed what this team's name is called? Yes, sharks. And because they put pictures of sharks. I like this one, like the 21. But they also put exemplars. So they could say, oh yeah, that 21 is bigger than transaction list. Now that has memory and meaning for them as a team, but it's a good reminder of, all right, if it's like that, if it's like transaction list, then it's going to be like Jaws. It's going to be a 21. Another one of I pointed out to Finn's team that, there's another team, and on one of their filing cabinets, they build Lego. And every now and again, I would come over and see the other Lego minifigs and other things that they'd added. But this was a symbol to everyone about, well, this is something that they value and that they enjoy doing together. And then, of course, there's this. Teams that do crazy things.
Forward. That's what? 9.
Okay.
QA.
Working
Time.
So one of my teams used charades as a way of talking about the decisions that led up to them delivering their increment, essentially their sprint review. That was about 12 months ago. They still talk about this, and other teams have tried to replicate it. About 3 months after this one, the Scrum Master then did Punch and Judy retrospective. But these are fun ways to create a sense of team, and stories are told as a result. And so everyone knows who these people are, and it helped to bind these people together. So that's creating shared meaning. Managing conflict is something that I certainly grapple with a lot of my teams. And sometimes we use the term like we want to resolve conflict. Conflict's bad, we need to resolve it. We need to get it out of the way, and so we can get on with working, because it holds us back, this angst holds us back from actually doing good work together. But what Gottman's research reinforces is that, strangely enough, 69% of conflict is actually unresolvable. 69%. So 7 out of 10 things that you're arguing about, you can't actually fix. Some of it is because of the nature of your backgrounds and different perspectives that you bring into the team. Some of it's because of different cultural perspectives. And out of all of these perpetual issues, 16% are going to be some of those things. Uncomfortable issues with hidden agendas. Now, what that actually means is not what it seems to be. A hidden agenda is simply you're arguing about one thing, but the real reason that you're cranky is about something else. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you were out with Jeff Patton last night and you didn't get home until like the wee hours of the morning and you're really tired and now you've got to get together a presentation. And so you put the presentation together and you're still really cranky and tired. But that's not the reason why. And that's the reason why we're having an argument, we're having some conflict, not because you don't like the colour of my shirt. So part of managing conflict, not resolving it, but managing the conflict. We started to talk at this retrospective about a concept known as flooding. Anyone familiar with that term, flooding? A couple of nods. Basically, flooding looks like this. So this is our low emotional state. We're calm, we're relaxed. Matthew has a nice speaking voice. He's making me go to sleep. This is where your prefrontal cortex is in control. Your logical brain is in control. Your amygdala, your animal brain, sitting there going, la, la, la. When you start to get into a high emotional state, guess what happens to your prefrontal cortex? It goes for a walk. You're out of control, and regardless of how much you think that you're being logical, there is no way you're being logical because you're in fight or flight mode, your BPM's gone up to at least 100, and all of those four horsemen that you've been keeping at bay because your prefrontal cortex is in control, it's not in control anymore, and they all come out. All those things that you shouldn't have been saying or have tried not to say because you're being nice and polite to all the rest of your teammates, it all comes flooding out. All of it. And you're like the back passenger going, oh my God, where's this going? Physiologically and neurologically speaking, when you are in a flooded state, you are not in control. So let's do a little exercise. Let's say that like a thermometer, 10, this is on a scale of 1 to 10, think about the last time that you lost it. And on a scale of 1 to 10, what was that sort of tipping point? So 1 is like a cat could walk past me and I would just freak out and I would lose it and I would be flooded. A 10 is like earthquakes could happen and the sky could fall and cats and dogs could be living together and it would like take all of those things all at the same time right here for me to lose it. That's 10. 5, somewhere in the middle. So have a think, like on a scale of 1 to 10. So remember that instance and think about that number and think about how you felt at that point. So everyone know how they felt at that point? You can nod if you like, yes? Yeah? Cool. So Peter, what was your number from 1 to 10? 8? Yeah, so it takes you quite a bit to actually get to that point. Suzanne, what about you?
Yeah,
about 8? Do you think that would be the same for everyone? Or are there people that you're less tolerant about with, and maybe some people that could maybe push you to a 9 or a 10 before you'd lose it? Robert, what about you? What was your number?
I was thinking 7.
About 7? Yeah, mine's about 7 as well. For you, what does 7 feel like at that tipping point?
I think I'm a bit unusual. When I hit that point, I don't go outward, I go inward.
You're really quiet? Yeah, it's sort of that smouldering volcanic thing. Introverts are like that. I'm like that. I go, and as soon as if I'm not, someone said to me once, when Matt's actually saying something, normally you should listen because Matt doesn't normally say things if he doesn't mean them. But normally if Matt goes really, really quiet at the other end, you know that something is really, really wrong. And for me, I can feel that tension. And anyone got one of these? So it's like a health band thingy. I've actually been looking at my resting heartbeat and actually looking at the times where I get really anxious and et cetera. And it's really helped me to understand my physiological response to stimuli around me. And I've noticed that when I'm with certain people, I feel really calm. And when I'm with some other people, it tends to go up a little bit more. Like if you have one, it's fascinating and really, really good for you to understand the contexts that actually drive these kinds of things, flooding. And so I said to the team, look, I've actually seen individual, I've seen you get flooded. So I said, this is something that I want you to start to think about. Think about your scale of 1 to 10, and if you feel that you're approaching that number, what I'd like you to do is say, I'm flooded, to the other person. And using the term flooded, that's the trigger word that we'll use as a team. Importantly, the second step is to then go away and do what's called self-soothing. Now, it doesn't mean you sit in there and go, oh, it's a good boy, it's a good boy. What it actually means is go away, don't think about work, don't think about the argument, don't think about all the things that you should have been saying to that person, like, oh yeah, I should have done that, because that's like an awesome comeback. Don't think about any of those things. Don't walk past the kitchen and see all the knives there. Just go, and what I do, I typically go for a walk. Go for a walk, take my phone, catch some Pokemon. Any other Pokemon Go fans in the room? Yeah, you know who you are. Was very happy I got the gym outside there yesterday. Sent a picture to my little daughter, she was stoked. But go away and do something that's not related to the incident. Go out of the context. The next important part is to actually come back. So if we're having an argument and I go, oh, I'm flooded, and I leave, and I don't come back, like half an hour goes past, an hour, 2 hours, how does that make you feel? A bit concerned, yeah. Some people feel like abandoned. Well, hang on, we're a team, and now you've gone away, and like this was now that you've sort of calmed down, now your prefrontal cortex is in control, and you're going, oh crap, I shouldn't have said all those things, and like this was actually an important thing that we needed to talk about, but just got out of control for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, so the part of this is to set a time box to come back. And for this team, I said, look, half an hour. If you come back and you're still flooded, that's okay. You just go, I'm flooded. Importantly, you don't go, you're flooded. So this is about you expressing how you feel. And as well, I said for team members, when you see this behavior, like if you see 2 people, 3 people going at it, don't tell them that they're flooded, just call flooded as a trigger word to get them to sort of start taking a step back and try to start taking control, helping the prefrontal cortex come to the fore. Sometimes, though, when we come back, things still need a bit of attention. As what Gottman calls repair attempts.
And so for a lot of years, we were looking at the repair attempt itself. How do people try to make it better? You know, like a repair attempt might be, gee, I don't think either one of us is really listening to the other right now. Maybe we should try again. Or a repair attempt might be, you know, this isn't really what we're supposed to be talking about. We're getting off on a tangent. Or a repair attempt might be, I need a break. Or a repair attempt might be, you know, I'm sorry. I really wish I hadn't said that. You know. And we were looking at the repair attempt and how it was said, and we found that we could not predict the effectiveness of repair from the nature of the repair attempt. And in fact, some people were making repair attempts in a beautiful way. It could have been written by a social worker, and you know, and it was failing. And other people were making repair attempts in this real clumsy way, and it was successful. So for years we were looking at what makes repair attempts effective, and we didn't find any answers until we started looking at the person receiving the repair attempt, right? And what made the difference was really how much emotional money in the bank they have with that person. So in other words, my repair attempt with Julie is going to work well if I've really been a good friend to her, you know, especially lately. If I've been really putting emotional deposits in the bank account that we have. And I've been doing nice things. I've been kind. I've been understanding. I've been there for her when she needs me. All those kinds of things. That determines whether she's going to accept my repair attempt.
So that's repair attempts and conflict. So we've got opportunities now to look at behavioural aspects and say, well, and understand the nature of a number of things that were really breaking down this team. I wanted to be able to get them from a perspective of having a lot of negative communications around that 0.8 to 1 ratio. And Gottman says that for good, healthy interpersonal relationships, what we're after is actually a ratio that's around 5 to 1 of positive to negative communications and interactions. And that means, as Gottman said, emotional banking. And so for the team, we started to talk about what we called small things often, and bids. So things like bid for help, which could be something as simple as delivering a communication to someone in the team or the team in general saying, I need help. I don't think I can do this by myself. Or bids for attention. So, oh, look at this wonderful thing that I did that's going to help us. That's also a bid. It's an opportunity. Someone's opening up for you to engage them. Or it could be something like bids for play. Some of my teams have whiteboards and they have their Kanban on that, and then every now and again I'll go up and I'll change a word and rub something out and put some crazy stuff on it and see how long it takes them before they actually notice that their Kanban has changed. But it's a bid for play. Bids for humour, so allowing people to share things that they find more funny. Or bids for affection. So obviously the marriage version of that one, very different to this one. But when someone, pats you on the shoulder and says, oh, that was a good job, or say, oh, give me a high five. These are bids for affection. Someone is opening themselves up and saying, I want to actually engage. So importantly, we started discussing some of those bids that team members had been doing and reinforced that, yes, these are opportunities to increase to that 5 to 1 ratio, but importantly, it has to be a two-way street. And so rather than ignoring it, someone goes, high five, and you go, that you see that as an opportunity to then turn towards rather than turning away. So being aware of bids then provides that opportunity for you to do that. Fondness and admiration then helps to close that loop. Being appreciative of what that actually means in terms of their contribution to the team in order to get to that nice 5 to 1 ratio. So I talked to them about a pattern and I'd seen a movie where this was done. Anyone ever played or know of Never Have I Ever? A few people, yeah, some people, yes, okay, cool. So the normal pattern is you go, never have I ever, and you say something, and if someone has done it, then they have to have a drink. So teenage girls might say, never have I ever kissed a boy, and then everyone has kissed a boy, they have to take a drink. So I said, look, how about we turn this into a gratitude pattern instead? So think about it and go to the pub, so have your retrospective in the pub, don't do it at work. If you finish the day on Friday, go and do this. But it's like, never have I ever appreciated John for his work in this sprint because he did that testing search functionality. He tested that and the outcome was really good for us as a team. It actually provided them a construct in which they could actually admit to the fact that they didn't appreciate John when he actually did it, and also then give permission for anyone else who also didn't do it to then take a drink. But using that as a mechanism to actually call it out and say, John, that was a good thing to do. So, never have I ever given praise to Sarah for bringing cookies to sprint planning so that everyone had lots of energy. Or chocolate, because I like bringing chocolate. Keep your energy levels up. Or never have I ever said thanks to Steve for reminding us to use the fault injection method for testing legacy services, which saved us so much time. And that's an actual example that they used. So after this retrospective, the next retrospective, this is what they did. They went to the pub after work. They finished their sprints on Tuesday, Wednesday is the end and the beginning of it. So Tuesday evening, they went and they played this game. trust is the difficult one. How do we build trust? There were conversations that I'd heard during this retrospective around, well, you know, I'm really, really good, so John, you've just got to trust me because I'm really good at what I do. And it's like, no, that's not where we should be going with this. I've got some great partners in my organisation, people that I rely on, and sometimes, yeah, they're not that appreciative of me, and they call me out and say, well, you didn't do this, but I know because I trust them, and we've built very, very strong relationships, that our relationship is the thing that's important, and maintaining that from both a company, a task perspective, as well as social cohesion means that our culture is strong. But rather than me try to continue to describe trust, let's let John do it.
How do you build trust? Again, you can turn to research because research is going to tell you specifically what it is that increases this trust metric. Turns out that trust is built in very small moments, which I call sliding door moments, after the movie Sliding Doors. Because in any interaction, there's a possibility of connection with our partner or turning away from our partner. Let me give you an example of that from my own relationship. So one night I was really wanting to finish a mystery novel. I thought I knew who the killer was, but I wanted to really find out. So I put the novel on my bedside and I walked in to the bathroom, and before I even got into the bathroom, I looked at my wife's face in the mirror and she looked sad. She was brushing her hair. So there was a sliding door moment. I had a choice. I could kind of sneak out of the bathroom and think, I don't want to deal with her sadness tonight. I want to read my novel. Now that really wouldn't define our relationship any, but because I'm a sensitive researcher of relationships, I decided to go into the bathroom. I took the brush from her hair and I said, "What's the matter, baby?" She told me why she was sad. Now, that moment, I was building trust. I was there for her, right? I was connecting with her, rather than choosing to think only about what I wanted.
That's trust. So let's wrap up. Towards the end of the retrospective, the team started to get a sense of that they had many, many patterns of behaviour, many rules, learning to be agile, rules around that, learning about their users, around their products. These were all things that were very important to them as a team. But equally as valuable as those things was for them to learn about their team members themselves, learn about them as people. That's why you hear often coaches will go, no, they're not resources, we're dealing with people. These are people. And so they have these kinds of needs. And respecting that and ensuring that you take time to learn about these people ensures good team cohesion. And so for them, their people rules were just as valuable as their agile rules. We came away, therefore, at the very end with what we called the 3 laws of robotics as their pattern of behaviour to help them understand as a team what sorts of behaviours, what sort of frameworks and constructs should they really be thinking about ultimately as a team. And the first one, don't allow the team or its members, by action or inaction, to come to harm. And this is very much about managing conflict, for example. I shouldn't stand by and see team members being in conflict because that hurts the whole team. And if you're standing by, it can often feel very uncomfortable when 2 team members are going at it. Hence, use the flooded pattern. Second rule, follow the direction of the Scrum Master or product owner, so long as it doesn't conflict with the first law. These 2 roles are there for a reason. Leadership in terms of how we do things, and leadership in terms of what it is that we do. And so there are consequences in relation to working in these kinds of ways, which means that they're the people to turn to. And importantly, for the health of the whole team, for the whole team to respect these roles, so long as it didn't conflict with the first rule. And the third one, look after your own work, because that's why we go to work, to do work. There's some great research by Mawson Weiss who say that if you remove the financial incentive to go to work, most people will still actually go to work because work is fulfilling for us. We do things that we like to do. And for those people who don't like doing what they do, their response is, yeah, I'd like to work, but I'd like to do my own thing. Or I'd like to go away and do something else. So work because it's intrinsically motivating. Yes, absolutely. As I discussed this with the team, look after your own work, delight in the work that you do. But importantly, so long as it does not conflict with the first or second laws. And that's the end. Thank you very much.